They say in Harlan County there are no neutrals there. You'll either be a Union man or a thug for J.H. Blair. Which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on? Tell me, which side are you on, boys? Which side are you on?
Alrighty. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Benjamin Berry. I'm an organizer with the Louisville Workers Brigade. This is Dalton Nolan. And we are very pleased today to have Matt Alley with BlueCollarWriter Labor Media to discuss labor journalism today. And so to start, thank you so much for being here, Matt. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what got you interested in organized labor, and the work that you do today?
Well, first, it's a pleasure to be here, and I thank you guys for inviting me. Boy, where does it begin? It literally begins 50 years ago. And when my dad was organizing for the first time, it took 3 tries, but it was the first time. And my mom was pregnant with me. He was trying to organize the mines he was working at. And it just became a thing. It was always around me. The organizing drives, seeing what they were doing, the fight, the struggle, the bad bosses, the bad things that corporate do, you know what I mean? And things like that. And it was just, that was where it began. And I understood really quickly that the deck was stacked against anyone who tried to organize. And a lot of times there was a thing out there that I saw, there was a lot of misinformation, and especially, in the 70s and the 80s, where people didn't have access to things. It was what their neighbor told them or what the boss told them. And there was a few newspapers that tried to help. And I really now go back and look at those archives and realize how bold that was in a small town, to stick their neck out. And from there, I just it was like a real interest in it, where I was like, these stories need to be told about what's going on, what they're fighting for, because, if you just see a blurb on television, you're not going to know it's about bad working conditions, bad pay, whatever. And people really needed information, and that's where it kind of started at. And then I just kind of went off and did the whole college thing, was the editor of a newspaper at Morehead State University. And I found myself being more of the type who was trying to do an activist journalist, bringing out the truth about things. And I was luckily had a professor who was like, hey, I kind of think you're going to be more going into this, and you go have a background in labor, and you understand, things that most people don't, where you have been there and done that. And so that's where it really started. And I kicked around the newspapers for a while, upon graduation. And then I got a call, well, it was actually an email from the United Mine Workers to say, hey, you want to, consider getting a job with us? And that's where my first union job was, as staff. And from there, I got a real lesson in being out there in the field and learning how to do just about everything on a very small shoestring budget of whatever your laptop could do. And you could pound out, things in a makeshift office and whatever needed to be done.
That's awesome. And before I forget, my sister, she's 19. She is right now a nursing student at Morehead. So,
oh, really?
I've not got to visit her yet. I've never been to Morehead, but I've heard it's beautiful down there. She loves it. So,
it's an interesting place. It's one of these things where during the time I was there, at least, the professors had real backgrounds and things and real working world experiences. Like I had a broadcast professor who worked with Dan Rather, and my advisor, all of my journalism classes professors, she was actually one of the first female editors in the state of Kentucky at Mount Sterling. So,
something that you mentioned was that, from the very beginning, that you've always been around, labor and unionism, with your dad having tried 3 times to unionize, which right. For one, that is incredible, because having to go back, after losing the first time and trying again and again, that's exactly. Quite impressive. With that, did he tell you any of these stories about that unionizing process and just what it was like having to not only go the first time, but then having to, afterwards go back and reanalyze what was going on?
Well, the first one I really was that much aware of because I was so young. But the second one, I saw his frustrations of seeing workers being intimidated and falling for things, some getting raises and just being like, I'm done. I got everything I wanted. And then not realizing in the long run that there wasn't a pension, there wasn't going to be retirement health care. It was just the now. And I learned a lot about the psychology of people and human nature. And that's something that we want to see the best in everybody. And I do believe everyone is good out there, but there is some people that you have to know when is their breaking points of extremes for each person. When will they be like, okay, this is a person we have to remind them we're here for them. We're all in this together so that they won't be intimidated or buy into the boss's lies. I saw a lot of that. And one of the things my dad told me many years later was I asked him after, they got their contract in 1993. And I was like, so was there a point you were afraid? And he was like, of course, absolutely. I had you on the way. And I was like, there was a good chance you get blacklisted. He was like, yes, there was a really good chance because in the small town there, the co-operators might have been in competition with each other, but they would share like, hey, don't hire this guy. We fired him for union organizing. And he could have been blacklisted, and there was absolutely nothing to fall back on. I mean, it was either you worked in the mines or that was it. No other jobs, nothing else. There might have been, some fast food jobs, but there was very little then. And what he told me, he was like, I would have rather us starved as a family and lost everything, but then to have you grow up thinking that you had to live in fear or to kiss a boss's ass to keep a job. And that stuck with me.
That's amazing. I mean, your father sounds like a great man. Is he still with us, or is he
Still
just
with us? Yes, he's 81 and still attends his union meetings and doesn't care to speak up and go out and still ride on. It was the buses when they needed him to go somewhere or whatever as an active retiree, because the thing he wanted most was something that's a little different than most unions. The UMWA had this thing called, it was cradle to the grave health care. And he knew he was trading his body and his time, and there was going to be health issues. So at the end of the road, that would be a 100% paid health care, that everything they need. And I look around at other guys that's his age that didn't work union, and a lot of them are struggling, and a lot of them don't have that easy access to go and, be able to say, sure, I can get the best doctor here. I can do this, versus I can't afford to do that. And it's a quality of life issue. So my parents are still living the American dream. They're very modest middle class. And that's what I saw from the beginning was that long-term planning. Everything's great when you're 20s, your 30s, and even 40s. But there's going to come a point where you're going to have to start thinking about your retirement, your golden years, quality of life. And the only way I've ever seen anybody to get that is either you're going to be rich, which most of us, the 99% are never going to be, or you can have a good union job and bargain for things like healthcare and a pension.
I know Dalton can speak on this too, but Appalachia has always had a special place in my heart, at least in terms of, my political awareness and organizing within labor. I mean, I grew up here in Louisville, and being in the big city and more of an affluent, family, there was this culture of misunderstanding about those that lived in Eastern Kentucky and other parts of Appalachia. And I don't know that I would have gone out of my way to say anything negatively about the folks that lived down there, but I certainly didn't have an understanding of the culture or history of the area. And getting into an adulthood and learning about, the Battle of Blair Mountain and the struggles of the coal wars and the, United Mine Workers. I mean, these are things that just I was never introduced to, never learned about. And to know that this is, just a couple hour drive from Louisville, that all of these major working class events have occurred and still continue to occur. It's almost criminal, the fact that this sort of history isn't taught.
There was, the time period that I grew up in Appalachia was the time period where you could see the change was beginning to. I was already a kid, and the middle class money was happening, and it was a big change for a small area. And think about per capita, we were making on average about what Detroit was at the time, but with only 14,000 people in the entire county. So that money was spread a lot differently and grew things. And I mean, sure, there was still some poverty here and there, but I was seeing 2 and 3 brand new cars in every, driveway. Everything was based around consumerism, uh, vacations, timeshares, people enjoying the middle class for the first time. Even my high school parking lot looked like a brand new car dealership at the time because of it was just that way. As I said, again, per capita was a big deal about the money, though. And every coal company was offering the highest wages to get the best workers. So it kind of created a buyer's market there, and headhunting pretty much to get, someone with experience and whatnot. And they were pretty much naming their own price at the time period. So, but once I moved out and was away, 10 years later, nothing was there. And right now, Martin County is being held up basically by union retirees paying taxes. Some people, minimum wage jobs and everything. And I can tell these stories, and there's younger people to be like, yeah, you're lying. And I've never seen anything like that here, But growing up where I did, though, I mean, I was always reminded, because Mate One being 40 miles away, and always getting to interact with retirees that were union retirees, and even the places I went, there was good union jobs in places like Ashland and Huntington. And I was always surrounded by people who were around for the original fight, or at least they were the grandchildren talking about what they heard that their grandfathers had to go through, getting their heads kicked in on the picket lines, back in the 40s and 50s for them in Ashland and Huntington. These were things that I never took for granted, because I know I saw my dad be on strike. I saw all the news reports of other places, and realizing it's like these people are trying to just fight for what's right, fight for theirs, fight for what they deserve. And it was something that, it separated me from the other kids, but I'm glad it did.
I know you've been involved in labor journalism for quite some time. You've got a perspective, obviously, on the rise and fall, and now the rise again of labor journalism. I mean, we know that there was a time in our history, or our country's history, where every newspaper, media outlet would have, if not one, but multiple journalists dedicated to a labor beat, covering, labor, organized labor, and working class issues. That obviously started to fall down, specifically, like you said, in the 70s and 80s, but we're starting to see a resurgence again with the resurgence of the labor movement. Could you talk about what you've seen during those times, and how that's influenced your work, and kind of what's keeping you busy today?
Well, in the beginning, my first newspaper job, there was an old curmudgeon that they had that was the labor beat guy, and he had seen everything and done everything, and he knew all the lingo. He knew all these terms that to us on the inside, we know all these things. When we start talking about collective bargaining, we start talking about the NLRB, all these different, you know what I mean? And while there's a new generation that's come in that I've seen, that along with, the decline of unions and corporations and buying up all local newspapers and TV stations and radio stations, it's kind of led to the thing of hiring people just with a degree and not much background experience, and that's going to be a real problem if there's no one there to teach them about labor journalism. And that's something that really bothers me, because I know I have a really good friend, I'm not going to mention his name, but he is a news director. And he said it gets frustrating that we get these new people in that we want to, invest in, spend time with them, teach them, but we're kind of like a farm baseball team. It was system, there where we just we'll hire in the young people, not pay them that much because the corporations that own them are like, no, it's, and what happens is they'll move out, go on to a new, some other place that's paying better, and you start the process again. And the older guys, like my friend, it's like, man, I've only got 10, 20 years left at best, there, and who's going to be here to teach them when I'm gone? As far as, I mean, we have Steve, Stephen Greenhouse is, our voice right now, in the labor beat. And there's a lot of good upstarts, like the work the more perfect union's doing. Rick Smith, my labor radio, those guys. But most of these are niche right now, where it's like you have to know about it. You have to go looking for it. You have to have the right podcast. You have to have a friend refer you, and things like that. And it does really bother me that when there's going to be people wanting to learn more about it, who's going to be there to teach them? And that's kind of the concern that I cannot harp enough about. And that's why that all of us who are doing grassroots stuff, we need to just keep getting out there and talking to the youth. And like with BlueCollarWriter, I do news aggregation for people to be like, I missed that story. Well, I have it right here every day for you. If you just read my feed, it's all here. This is the stuff that's going on. I never heard about this. Well, it's right here. You just didn't dig deep enough. And I realize most people are working, or perhaps they don't care enough. That's what I do to try to give them that. And also I do Hibbs commentary and analysis about what I think's going on. But I'm just loving the fact that there's more and more people out there using all forms of media now to get the word out. And in the future of newspapers and things like that, well, I could just hope for the best, because it's not looking good.
I think a big part of that that we're seeing, with the growing resurgence of the labor movement, we're seeing that a lot of young people are much more involved. And you mentioned More Perfect Union. More Perfect Union is primarily young people, and it shows that there's a clear trend of where young people are getting involved. They're paying attention, and they're leading these struggles. Starbucks, Workers United, the fight in Amazon. All these different struggles are being led by young people who are understanding for the first time that, we need to basically assert ourselves and fight against what is the corporations and the owning class using their power to target us, because we know that in history, when you fight the bosses, you're able to get your demands and leverage a lot more power. And with young people now taking that charge, that legacy, it's a good sign for the future, I would say.
Oh, it really is. I mean, I have said on other podcasts and that I have a lot of faith in the youth. I quickly realized that my Gen X kind of missed the message of being the first generation to go to college. Didn't mean everybody thinks they're going to be a boss. Okay. And that was one of the things that I was really aggravated with, was I was looking around at my gen and I'm like, you have more in common with each other, us who are working here instead of corporate, and I think that was a translation lost about your parents wanting you to go out and, work with your brain and not your hands, sort of thing, they're into work better, it's like, well, there's only going to be so many bosses, guys, you know what I mean? And kind of figure this out. But the youth is the only thing that's keeping in this depressive time we're in right now. I am loving everything I'm seeing with stuff that they're doing on social media, with TikTok, things like that, that when I started, I had to absolutely spell it out why I wanted to do a mobile friendly website for an organizing drive I put together. It's like I was being told, what do you mean? People are going to be looking at their phones at work, and I'm like, yeah, it's coming to this, and it's like, and this was a time period pre-iPhone, okay, when I put that together. The new ideas, the energy, and understanding that I was taught how to write leaflets, let's say, okay, for, in the old days there, I had to get my message out from one point where you hand them the leaflet to the first trash can. And I think the modern equivalency of TikTok is no different. You got to get it out there that quick because attention spans. And I'm like, it's not really changed that much. It's just way better tech. And now there's people out there who understand the fight. You see the future, what it is, unless you fight to change it. While previous generations were just like, well, it was better before, maybe it'll come back around again. And yeah, well, I've been Chicken Little now for the past 35 years, and the sky is falling, but I'm loving everything you all that they're doing. It's just, and that's why I'm like, what I was also going to say was there's a place for these long form written essays about, it was letters to the editor and everything else. That's beautiful. That's brilliant. That's great. But all of us know it was the culture. Quick fix, get the message out, and get it that way. And that's something that, again, that the youth, I'm just like, hell yeah, they finally get it. This is what I've been harping about, instead of being told we need to write a letter to the editor, and I'm like, who's going to read that?
I'm curious if you have thoughts, because you brought up a great point that I wanted to return to, is that you have this resurgence of labor that's being led by the youth, and you have this generation and a half of distance between them and kind of the last big wave of labor, your father's generation. And while it's great to see this resurgence today, I think one thing we have to keep in mind is, like you had talked about, the mentorship that the youth need, so that they don't make the same mistakes that the older generations made, and can learn and continue instead of having to start over again. Do you have any, especially with, your father's legacy and everything, what are ways that organizers, those that support organized labor, can do to help bridge that generational gap, so that young people, have the tools that were already forged by those older generations of labor organizers?
I would say one of the first things is to always make sure that you let them know that they can come to you. I'm talking about, the mentors, and message, talk, whatever, come and see me here. Create, well, that's already kind of being done, like younger gen groups within unions, so it was the subsets of that. They can help craft a message to talk to people their age, and things like that. One of the main things is not to become, to a point like I've seen some do, old and think you know it all, and not realizing that things might be fundamentally the same, but the tools are changing, and to listen to the new ideas, have them ask questions about, because and always have the legal department there to help them, also saying, well, we'd love to do that, but we can't do this because of this, because it could hurt you in the long run. Those are the things that just open forums to talk back and forth, and just basically communications, and and to keep saying, hey, you can do you can come in and talk to us about this, or come and sit in on this, this meeting, or you and your youth group can come out and do help with, auxiliary things with picket lines and things like that. Inclusion, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and the more you do it, and just remember, I know back when I was young, I was actually learning the most by these long car rides with these old organizers that were strike captains at Pittston in the 93 strike. I would shut up, sit in the back, listen, wait my turn, ask questions about what they were talking about. And every time they would break down the acronyms that I didn't understand, and things like that. And it's inclusion and mentorships and everything else that, and also, just to remember that we can always keep learning from each generation. The old can learn from the young can learn from the old,
100%. you mentioned the Pittston strike. I recently just read a book called "A Strike Like No Other Strike" about that. That labor struggle. That was an interesting book because it went about it from a legal perspective and just how the United Mine Workers have had to adjust over the years to, even going as far back as the establishment of the NLRB, and how with Pittston it was kind of an awakening for a lot of the miners there that the law's not really on our side here. And obviously there was a lot of vigilante organizing that occurred there. They were fined out the wazoo, obviously, because of those actions. But nevertheless, to see that radicalism among the rank and file, which has kind of been characteristic of miners from time immemorial, unlike a lot of other industries, it seems like the miners have always had a very strong rank and file participation. Has that been your experience as well?
It was until, let's say, the last coal boom. Everybody thought they were an entrepreneur, or they were a hustler in their own way. When you're talking to a kid that's 20 years old making $90,000, he doesn't give a damn about a pension, health care when he retires, things like that. And and there has been a lot of little tricks that you all know about, shifting hourly to salary, and just things like that. I mean, there was, and everything that they did was to ultimately make sure that they were not going to let the same things happen again. But we all know there comes a point, though, in every industry that you can only take enough shit and you're going to fight back. And that's generally for every job. Yeah. And what I saw, no disrespect to anyone working still in the coal industry. It's sometimes those non-union miners have to just lose everything they got to realize, hey, that boss was never my friend. That company never cared a bit about me. And I have nothing else to fall back on. And now I've got, $500,000. If it's all took for a house, I got a mortgage on. What in the hell am I going to do? And it's going to take that.
Has the union, or I'm sure there's other community groups, obviously Appalachia not only has this long history of heavy economic exploitation with the coal operators, but now in more modern history, we know that the big pharmaceutical companies targeted your all's area to distribute these highly addictive substances that they knew were highly addictive, didn't advertise them as such, and we know that this was a targeted campaign to even further erode the community and solidarity that you all have in Appalachia. What has your experience been with the opioid epidemic? And I'm sure you've been personally affected by friends, family, perhaps. And are there any efforts right now to combat that?
Well, I mean, October 27th made 15 years I have been clean. So I have, I know a lot about the painkiller addiction thing. I was gone during most of what happened in Appalachia. It was and it was targeted, yes. And it was a thing where it was just easier to get away with, hey, all of these back-breaking jobs, that they're doing there, this justifies this, a lot has happened, a lot has changed. A lot had to be done, between, it started with it having to be cut off first, okay? And then there was recovery. And now that I personally know people now that are just still finally getting out of it, there's now a stigma that is an even worse stigma than what it was with the hillbilly. Now it's the pillbilly. And now that's been 10, 15 years, 10 years easily gone for here, it still sticks. There is groups out there, and there is a lot of stuff coming out that these people were just as much vampires as, they were saying, we're here to help. but they were just siphoning government money and things like that. And it's yet again, don't trust the outsider. That's been an Appalachian thing. Every time they come in, they take our land, they destroy things, they take our money, they take our lives. And this was another case of that. So I think the people out there that are not a clinical corporate groups, okay, are doing the best work for doing, like we're here for you. And it's family to family, neighbor to neighbor, understanding that this was no longer just something that happened to those dirty people. This happened to my dad, my grandfather, my sister, my mom. And that's been the biggest change that I've seen, where it's no longer just as much where you just like that's somebody else's problem. Now the area kind of embraced it as we realize it. Every one of us knows somebody. And again, for me, I mean, I'm lucky to be here. I mean, I was a 25, it was back at 10 a day guy, there, and a couple overdoses, and I had to hit rock bottom before I had to change, and it's been 15 years.
Well, congratulations on your recovery. Obviously, like you said, I mean, so many people didn't make it out, and another book that recently, I think I read last year, was Barbara Kingsolver's Demon Copperhead. I don't know if you've heard about that book.
No, I haven't heard of that one, though.
Barbara Kingsolver is originally from Kentucky, I think, and she wanted to write a book about Appalachia and her experience with the opioid epidemic, with economic exploitation. It's a hard read. I mean, it's not a rainbows and unicorns sort of book. It's very, very dark. It deals with some very, very heavy issues, but it gave a very humanized depiction of Appalachia and specifically the opioid epidemic from the perspective of this one character, this one family. And like I said, it's a hard book to get through, but I'm glad that there are authors out there that are trying to bring some humanity and dignity to this situation. And like you said, a lot of it is that it's beyond Appalachia now. I mean, I remember when the opioid epidemic first started getting on the news, and it was, like you said, everyone else's problem. And then here in Louisville, in the richest neighborhoods of Louisville, suddenly you have, private school teenagers, that are using these substances as well. And I think that it's sad that it took that for the whole community to come together and realize that this is an issue that we all need to grapple with. But I think that attitudes hopefully are starting to change.
I think I really do think they are, and it's a thing of where people, again, they usually know somebody or know someone that's been through it, or at least they've had an eye view of what's been going on, watching another family struggle. And I just want to add, anybody out there that thinks that this they can't get out, you can get out, and you just have to have the right support system. And one thing, I know everybody's path is different, but I had to absolutely not have even one pinky toe still stuck in the dirty water, as they say. I had to get away from everybody that I knew that was around everything, be cut off, be completely, for me to change. And I'm here now because of that. And I made that part of everything I do now, being like, it's one of the first, intro things I will tell you about. Hey, I'm an ex-junkie, and then you take it from there. You own it, and that's the big thing I'm trying to say is you take ownership of, what happened, who you are, and I promise you all, there is a second chance. I promise.
Could you talk a little bit about just, and I know you've already touched on it, but just what your views are on the state of the labor movement in the country, in the state? We were looking at some stats beforehand that, like everywhere else, I mean, Kentucky had been on a downward trend when it came to union representation, but it actually started changing, at least here in the state, around 2022. I'm sure we have a new AFL-CIO president here in Kentucky, Dustin Reinstedler, who, when we announced that we were doing an education with you, actually commented saying like he follows you, he loves following your coverage. So so that's pretty awesome. But could you talk about just kind of the trends that you're seeing and what your thoughts are on the modern movement?
Well, first, I mean, I really want to address the elephant. It was the elephant in the room, the fears of the future, the NLRB under Trump, and these anti-labor politicians that are in charge now. I was down. I did a weekend getaway where I had to completely shut everything off, and get my wits together. But I started thinking about how many other times has the deck been stacked, the odds been impossible, and labor has always persevered, and they found a way. I remember something to Rich Trumka, one of the guys I got to sit out there the learning tree of. It was like rules are meant to be broken and injunctions are meant to be violated. It's the only way you're going to make change. I mean, I'm not saying everything has to be militant, but when push comes to shove, labor has always, they've tried to stomp us out since, over 100 years ago. And then, and even more than that, in European countries and whatnot. But we always persevere. We always are, finding a way to adapt and change. And a lot of it to the downfall of labor, especially in Kentucky, was the layoffs and things like that. It wasn't as much people saying, "Oh, right to work here, I'm going to, not pay you." It was pay union dues. It was more of a matter of when you lose. Like at the mines my dad was at, I think it was like 600 hourly employees that were union, and that's a big chunk. You lose various smaller places. There might be 100 people here and there, and maybe the Teamsters are represented. Those things add up, and the thing, though, that every union needs to remember that your lifeblood is organizing. It's not sitting around waiting and hoping and doing this. You've got to be out there every day doing the education process of, this is what we do. We're in your community. We are your neighbors. We are your friends. We are here fighting for the working class. And I see great things in the future because, again, the wave of the younger people, they get it. They have to understand that what do I have in the future? And it's never going to change unless we make it change, which was the same mantra of the coal miners who marched up Blair Mountain. It's the same idea. And if you're working somewhere where you have, obviously the bosses are making millions, while you're getting paid not even a living wage, it is your damn right to say we deserve better. And I believe that the youth is just going to keep saying, I want better, but it's going to take us all together in solidarity to make that happen. And I'm hopeful, despite the dark clouds that we're going to have to get through, and there's going to be a lot of fights, and it's not going to be easy, and it's going to be disheartening. And if I can share a story that one of my mentors once told, it was a labor mentor. He was like, conserve your energy. The fight's always going to be here. Know when to, throttle down, know when to pull back, because it ain't never going to end because human beings are human beings and greed is always going to exist. So just know the fight's going to be here, but take time to enjoy the things that matter also, like friends, family, and most of all, your hobbies. I remember him once, I was that eager young kid in the car, you know what I mean, asking every question I could about pits, and he was just like, Allie, do you like football? Yes, I love football. Talk to me about football. And it was one of those things where it's like there's a time and a place, and then once we got to where we were going, it was game on. And that's something I try to tell every young person. It's like, you're going to burn out. I burned out a million times. But conserve your energy, take time and keep things in perspective, and know when to fight, and know when not to also.
Absolutely.
Wrapping up, and again, we so greatly appreciate all of your time and experience and stories today. Could you tell us, are there any other stories, anecdotes that you want to share from your time in organizing and providing coverage of labor issues. Any other insights? And then if you could close out by telling us telling our viewers here where they can follow you on social media, where they can read your writings and all that good stuff.
I think, I have a million funny stories that's happened out there, but the ones that matter the most to me is going back and talking to a guy that we had helped organize, and I hadn't seen him in about 2 years. It was one of these random, we go back and saw him, sort of give us scenarios. And he was so proud of the fact that he was like, I have X number of dollars saved. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning that he had never done for his kids. You know what I mean? And he was just happy. He was actually looked healthier. I've seen things where people's lives change when they don't have to worry about the struggle every day, and that meant everything to me, that he was just like so elated that look what I did, look what happened finally. And he thanked the union for it, because it would never happen for him. He's like, I would have never known what to do unless we had something to make change for us like this did. And I was like, just remember, you guys are the union. It's not us, it's you. And that ownership is something that, outsiders don't understand. The unions may have staff and things like that. And I've been on several of them, but the thing is, the unions are the workers. You are the union. That's one of the messages that you always have to tell your coworkers when you organize it. We are the union, not them. We are. And you can find most of my work, just about all of my social links are going to be at BlueCollarWriter. There's links on my website, BlueCollarWriter.com. I've been lifting the paywall on my Patreon a little bit for certain articles, but that's where you need to go for my commentaries. I mean, I do consulting and graphic design in my day job, and BlueCollarWriter is fully funded by by contributions, by donations and things. And I always said the day that I have to start borrowing from myself to pay for this, I can't do it anymore. So Patreon, there is a paywall on some things, but that's usually where my commentaries are, and there are pretty affordable monthly fees for that. But yeah, I'm always there. I've been around since 1999, back when there was a thing called Blogger back then. Okay. And people were like, what's a blog? Why are you doing this? And I hope to keep doing this till whenever. And I just want to keep doing networks with people, with guys like you, with your organization. The partnerships that I've had with Rick Smith and others, we're all one big labor media community in a way, whether it might not be what you exactly do, but, and the more we support one another and talk to one another about it and tell others about what we do, the more people might learn from it and be there, and to learn about the past, the future, and their rights on the job.
Well, from the big city of Louisville, Kentucky to Appalachia, we extend our love and support and solidarity to your community and to you. Again, thank you so much for the work that you do, shining a light on working class issues. It is so desperately needed. And as you said, I mean, especially now with what we're looking at, here in the future, in the political landscape, we need folks that are out there organizing, talking about the issues. I mean, that's so critical. So thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Thank you all.
This union maid was wise to the tricks of company spies. She couldn't be fooled by a company stool. She'd always organize the guys. She'd always get her way. When she struck for better pay, she'd show her card to the National Guard, and this is what she'd say. Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union.